AI doing I think it's really starting to happen. So the question is, how fast will AI doing AI accelerate AI doing efficiency? And I think it's going to get really, really fast.
Yep.
Our brains don't quite comprehend.
Before the last 5 years of development, most people were saying that it would take another 30 to 60 years or something.
Yeah,
and
no
now it's like 5 to 20 basically max. And it's a huge shift in thinking. And who knows, with more developments, they might shorten the time span.
Imagine a world where AI does AI is commonplace, right? And you want to start a business, and go, AI, here's $50,000. I want to launch a business like that one over there. And the AI will go build a marketing plan, will acquire users, will build a platform to provide that service and start collecting money. The only problem is somebody else has probably done that too. So the competition is going to the bottom. Right?
Hello, welcome to the second episode of Embracing Singularity. Our topic for this episode is the commoditization of intelligence. This was our first recording, and it being the first recording, we did kind of ramble on across the landscape of AI, but I think this makes it a much more interesting conversation. So enjoy the episode up ahead, and thank you for tuning in.
Okay, I'm not sure where we're supposed to look at, but how do we start this thing?
Well, I am really excited to be here with you.
Likewise.
I thought about it. I'm excited for many reasons.
Okay.
One is, I credit you as someone who I always come to for first principles advice.
Yes.
And I think
a lot of first principles.
that's right. And not just that, I think you are someone who I've also seen as a very founder-friendly investor.
I'm a friendly guy in general.
No, but you're very founder-friendly. And I think you're one of the first persons I spoke with when I decided to change my career and quit my job many years ago.
Don't blame me.
I still remember what you said. I think it was 10 years ago in Beijing. And you said to me very pointedly, how are you going to start a world-class company if you're still working for someone else? And I remember thinking, wow, like that's pretty explicit. And you really struck a chord for me. So I remembered. And I think I quit very shortly after from my job. So maybe, just for everyone's context, right? I think, there's a huge revolution that we think is underway.
Yes.
And, I've been very affected by it for many reasons. And maybe we can both talk a bit about that. But when I thought about, whom to talk about it with, I sought you out. And we had, supposed to be a 30-minute catch-up. It ended up being a 3-hour.
Was it 3 hours?
It was, yes. We finished at 5 something. We started at 2:30.
Only possible on weekends.
Only possible on weekends. But we ended up talking about where we saw the world going.
Yes.
And I think that led to the genesis of this.
Yes,
maybe if I may start by asking a question, right?
Ask away.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of there's been a lot of news about AI coming out the past couple of years.
Yes.
But, you've been a technologist, a computer scientist, a student.
AI person.
For many years, right? So maybe let's start out by asking, you've been seeing many, waves of technology changes in the past, 30, 40 years. How is this one different? How are you, how does it feel having been in this field for so long?
So I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time because my graduate work was in AI. I went to the US to study simply because I wanted to study intelligence and how you create intelligence, how you build systems that were intelligent, etc. And unfortunately, I was a bit early. I was in grad school in the late 80s, and we really haven't figured out that much yet. We have figured out some. In fact, some of the underpinnings of today's LLMs and large neural networks came from those days, but it's so different. The scale, the magnitude of data, the compute requirements, etc. It's just totally different. I started thinking about this way back. We're sitting in what I call my mostly sci-fi library, right? And a lot of these books affected how I think from very, very young. And you start to think about what is possible in the world. And one of the things that you realize when you unfold machines, right, and it's the nature of machines and how it impinges on societal evolution is you start to realize at some point in the evolution of a sentient species, they will come to a point where they build a machine that's its equivalent intellectually, at least, right? And at that point, the future sort of diverges from before, right? Because what you can do with that capability with your machines is very, very different than from before, right? You can create 1 million scientists and go study a particular topic, right? And you have 1 million scientists working on it, right? That's almost impossible to do with humans, right, today. But with machines, you could do that, right? So we're approaching a very exponentially divergent part of our history, and so as they say, everything changes. And one of the challenges for us as entrepreneurs is what's going to change, and how are we going to ride these waves that are coming at us?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, one of the things that we wanted to talk a lot about, which is what should we do as investors and founders. But before we go there, since we're in this room, may I ask if you've read even half of these books?
No.
What percentage have you read? Like 10%?
I have about 10,000 books in this whole building.
Yep.
I've read maybe 1,000. So
okay.
Maybe less, but I've read almost all the authors.
Okay.
Just not all the books.
And you said a lot of them are science fiction.
Almost
is that
all.
Correct? Almost all. Wow. And that was the intention from the very beginning?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. And is there a book or two that's really shaped your thinking or that you really, really love?
The book that I really love is everyone's favorite sci-fi book, Frank Herbert's Dune.
Oh, okay.
Which it just explores almost every aspect of human society and human existence.
Yep.
The book that caused me to think a lot was Olivia Butler's got the title Sowers of the Talents or something like that. Okay. It's the second book of the series, the Talent series. And in that book, it's a post-apocalyptic novel, but they describe the founder of a new religion called the Seed. And it's a very practical religion. The religion is basically faith that the purpose of humans is to seed life in the universe.
Say that again? The purpose of humans
is to seed life into the universe.
Seed life into the universe. Okay.
Yeah, that's why it's called the Seed.
Okay.
So, and it's a very practical religion. It gives you a purpose.
How is that different from what we do today in terms of having children or starting companies?
We don't necessarily think about going to Mars or going outside the solar system, etc.
Okay.
So this religion is the seed of humanity exploding into the stars.
Oh, I say seed. Oh, seed anywhere for that matter, not necessarily just on Earth, basically. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay.
I thought it was an interesting way to look at the purpose of a religion.
Interesting. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess these two books are some of the ones that you really enjoyed reading. And actually, it's funny because we talked about Dune the first time we had our conversation.
How long ago?
This is not too long ago.
Oh, because, just the recent
one. Yes. Because we were talking about how we thought AI might really change things.
Yes.
And I think Dune, how Dune is shaped, I guess, is one of the reference points that we had. I remember the other one was Mad Max.
Mad Max?
Yes. And another one was like a socialist revolution kind of thing. Yeah. So maybe why don't we use that as a segue into talking about, you just mentioned earlier that you think a big shift is underway and, things that were not doable when you were studying AI, back in the 80s is now normal.
Yeah.
What are some of these things that you're seeing and what are you most shaken by, I guess?
Shaken, excited maybe. The first sort of phase of AI is kind of very obvious now. It's what I call AI does efficiency, right? AI can do a lot of what we humans can do now, but much faster, much more efficient, and much cheaper, right? So everything from creating a PowerPoint deck for us, or analyzing an email, or boy, there's so many things.
The other day I was because I run a social commerce platform, and we're looking at how to use AI live streaming.
Yes.
Because one of the issues that live streamers have is they get tired after a while.
A few hours.
But actually doing it for 24 hours can actually increase your GMV substantially versus doing it for 4 hours, right? And I was like, oh, how do I do my research? I used ChatGPT. And I did my research that I would traditionally, maybe even hire an analyst to do. And something that I took maybe 2 weeks to do, I did it in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was kind of shocking, right? Because it's a huge jump. And, competitive analysis is what people in the investment world do, right?
Yeah.
And now don't get me wrong, there were many things I wanted to deep dive into that maybe it didn't allow me to. I hadn't, really probed it for, but I was really struck by that. So, I think when you say AI doing efficiency, that's a really, that's an example.
And even then it's not that great right now because it does guess at what you're doing, but it doesn't guess very well.
That's true. Yeah.
I think fast forward a year or two, the AI will almost be able to predict what you want just by interacting with you and understanding your environment.
That's true.
So I have friends that are sort of CEO friends that are addicted to ChatGPT. Right? They talk about their relationship problems with it. They talk about the restaurant choices with it.
Yep.
Not to mention work and all that. That's why we pay for the accounts, right?
Yep.
And what they tell me is that ChatGPT now really understands, what they want. They can think about what they said a few weeks ago and then bring it into the context.
That's right.
And so it's like your work companion who knows you very well.
Yeah.
And that's just one aspect of it, right? So any domain where you see a machine needs to understand you and do what you would otherwise do, that's gonna be possible. With AI doing efficiency. Right?
So I think you mentioned two things though. One is efficiency, and the other is an aspect of personalization to you, right? Because, for example, I deal with your assistant very often when scheduling time with you. And while you can say scheduling is not, super hard to do, but she really understands your patterns, what you prefer, whether I should meet you at your house or so forth. And she probably knows to some degree, who matters and who doesn't as well.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? Okay. But I think that comes from working
Everyone
with you.
Matters.
No. It takes time to understand that, right? So to your point, I think that the fact that they can not only do stuff faster, but also understand what you might need is important as well.
Over time. It's just, efficiency.
Yeah.
And that's a bit scary because if you push that out into the future, what naturally will happen is productivity goes through the roof. Which is a less scary way of saying the value of labor starts to fall. Right? What happens beyond that? Maybe some other podcast we can dive into.
We should talk about that. We're in the right room to talk about economic and technological singularity.
Yes.
But okay, so the value of labor goes down, and that could be very exciting or that could be very scary. Is that correct?
Well, going into a world of abundance, but it's very unevenly spread abundance. That's what I worry about.
I really want to touch on that, but maybe before we go there, I remember that you shared with me you thought of the world in two ways. One was AI making our lives more efficient.
Yes.
But I think there was a second trend that you mentioned to me, which is AI doing AI.
Yes.
Is that the other way to think about this?
The phase two of AI. So AI does efficiency, but the phase two is AI does AI. So in some ways, AI does AI is just AI doing efficiency on people building AI. Right? But it allows the technology to accelerate in a rate that otherwise it wouldn't. Let's say in phase one, some VC invests $100 million, builds a best AI lawyer in the world, right? And then you wait a few years, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and then this AI that can build AI is around, and you say, hey, please clone me that AI lawyer. Hit a button, boom, you get this AI lawyer for 10 minutes of compute time.
Make sure I understand what you're saying, right? So in phase one, there are AI tools out there that make me better as a lawyer, and that eventually might actually be able to do all my job.
Yes.
And then phase two is where, what is the difference between phase two and phase one?
Phase two is when, the AI lawyer in phase one was built by a bunch of humans and lawyers.
Yep.
Right. The equivalent AI lawyer in phase two is built.
The AI lawyer is built by AI. I see, but who is the AI that built that builds the AI lawyer in phase two? Why is he building the AI lawyer?
Competitive.
Competitive.
Right? They probably succeeded in carving a nice chunk of the market because it's very precise, very exact, very fast. So it accelerates lawyers' capabilities to go through legal documents, but only the subscribers to this very expensive AI lawyer has that capability. What if you could build a competitive service that is a tenth the cost? Because you didn't have to invest $1 million to build it. You just click the button, popped out.
So you're saying a competitor might want to replicate AI lawyer Peng Sin. And literally say, build me, copy Peng Sin and let's build another AI bot.
Yes. Yeah.
Or Peng Sin himself could decide to replicate himself because it's faster to do work if you have, more lawyers.
Yeah. So there's lots of ways to think about it. And it's not just AI building AI efficient AI. It's AI building AI building AI building AI. Right? So it keeps recurring. And you already start to see it in some of these LLMs that OpenAI, Google, Grok, X. What they're doing is actually using the current model to start to build next generation. Right? At some point, there won't be humans involved. So that is I guess AI ancestry.
Yeah, right? There was a joke that it was a DeepSeek, the Chinese foundational model. When you ask, apparently it's like performs better in some ways, but when you ask it like, "Who are you?" it says, "I'm OpenAI," and no one knows why, right? But one of the hypotheses is that maybe it was trained on some of the other models' data, right? And so much so that it somehow has adopted its identity.
Yeah.
So it's probably already happening, right?
Yes. Yeah. So and so it will accelerate the creation of AIs and better AIs. And in the end, if you think about what AIs is actually doing, is actually automating the generation of knowledge.
Can I ask a question there, though, which I don't think we've explored, which is, do you think that AI generating AI can happen without man at its control, right? So will it happen randomly, or is there someone behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. No, I think for now that as human beings, I think human beings will always be directing. I think at some point though, they might be complex enough that we might not have the ability to go down to the technical level to understand what it's doing. We might give it like broad directions. Please improve yourself. Create version.
Yep.
X+1.
Please please become the top law firm in the world.
Yeah.
And then I create the first lawyer, but then they decide how to create the second, third, fourth, fifth lawyers, or
and because simply we cannot keep up. Our human brains cannot keep up with this. And I'm including all the folks doing AI, etc. And that's where I think the AI engineers and the ethicists start to scratch their heads as to how safe is this, how good this is or not good this is.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to this. I just know it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, actually, it was funny. I was with I was a graduate of Stanford, right? And I was with someone from one of the leading institutes for AI within there, and he's one of the leaders of that institute. And I was like, oh, what are you trying to do? He said, we may want to build our own foundational model. And I said, why. And they said, the truth is we want to understand how it works.
Yeah.
And I don't think most of us do.
Nobody understands.
Right. And, and he's like, and everyone is fighting the arms race right now. They're not necessarily going to let researchers research it because they want to keep it to themselves. But even them may not totally understand it. Right. So, to hear people at the forefront of this saying that they themselves are having trouble keeping up, it definitely reinforces what you say.
If you think about how nuts this is, we've got a technology that is going to start taking over large chunks of how the world operates, and we actually don't really understand how it works, how these emergent intelligent behaviors come about. Right? We have some broad theories, but if we go into a piece of the neural network and go, what does this piece do? We have no idea.
I mean, is it not just pattern matching and looking
Could
at
be.
Yeah?
This could be the result of just huge amounts of pattern matching, and maybe that's what our brains are too.
Yep.
So who knows?
Yeah. Actually, the funny thing is, if you read all the research on the brain, people always say that we actually know the least about our brain and how it works too. So, if we don't really understand how our own brain works, and then we're building this new technology, it's actually kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. So there's something about how the neural networks get connected together. The current neural network architecture started by looking at the brainstem and how the cells are sort of wired, and that was in the 50s, and we haven't changed that approach since then. And I think some of the more interesting work that's around AI is questioning that model and trying to model the neurons in the frontal cortex instead of the brainstem, so that you can get more efficient sort of emulation of neural networks. Because we know intelligence is processed here. Back here is just responses, instinctive responses, etc. So if you want to talk about reasoning and spatial, both spatial, temporal, and just logic reasoning, it's all here.
Yep.
So and we understand the architecture of this stuff much better than in the 50s. Right? So we should be able to build better models. So I'm very excited about the work going on in that direction. It'll take a while. Right now we have a 50s architecture, but turbocharged with today's hardware.
Data and hardware, right? Yeah. Oh, interesting. Do you think that we are yet to see a lot more breakthroughs? Because not just on the hardware side, right? But what you just said, right? Some of the ways we think, how we process that data right now, or the algorithms with which you use, to some degree, they've been used for a while, right? In fact, I was reading this Li Feifei's book, The Worlds We See. And, honestly, if you break it down, what she brought to the table was actually the ability to put together large sets of data and actually to label them. And then what they did was they ran a competition to see which algorithms would work on them. And it ended up being an algorithm from like a long time ago. It wasn't but it was the algorithm from a long time ago, plus the ability to access huge amounts of data, right?
Yeah.
So do you see there being more breakthroughs on the algorithm side?
Here's evidence of why AI is so inefficient. The brain in my head is running at about 50 watts. I'm awake now, so that's about when it burns 50, 60 watts of energy. I don't know how many watts ChatGPT burns, but it's probably in the thousands, if not tens of thousands.
Yeah, I've seen data on this.
So just proof by existence that there's a lot more optimization to go.
I totally agree.
So we'll see what happens, but it's almost not a choice, but for the software engineers, for the AI folks to go optimize this stuff, because we don't have enough power on the planet to run all the AI.
How much of this do you think is a software versus a hardware problem? I don't know if you have a view.
I think 2 to 4 orders of magnitude is probably softwareable.
And the rest is?
If you take 2 to 4 orders of magnitude, you start to approach human
capabilities, efficiency, basically.
And maybe more. So is there a need to? Yeah, I guess you could. At this point, if we actually achieve somewhere close to that, it's no longer a problem to solve. The AIs will solve it.
And so that's the other thing we talked about, right? Because I think AI doing AI, people forget that they are going to be able to help to solve some of these AI problems as well, right?
Yes.
Because right now
all of science, not just AI science, right?
There was an article I think I sent you this morning, which was about AI, open AI trying to solve the longevity problem. Yeah. And now it's they're doing the work that life science researchers have been doing for I don't know, decades or centuries, really.
Potentially a lot faster.
Yeah. And basically now they're solving the fundamental issues. So some of the things that we just talked about, they could help solve too, and therefore shorten the time. Yes. So actually, this is the other thing we spoke about the first time we got together to talk about this, which was our time horizon. Yep. Right? Because I think that was the scary part actually when I spoke to you. So
I still think
so we talked about phase 1, which is AI doing efficiency, and phase 2, which is AI doing AI, where AI can build itself and it can actually solve some of these computing problems to actually build itself. What is your sense of how long phase 1 will take and how long phase 2 will take?
Phase 1 will be from here on. It's been happening for a few years, right? Yeah. So what I worry about is the singularity, which I hope will be like 20 years from now.
Economic or technological?
Economic singularity. Okay. Because human systems are slow to adapt.
Exactly.
Right? So it'll take time. AI doing AI, I think it's really starting to happen. So the question is, how fast will AI doing AI accelerate AI doing efficiency? Right? And I think it's going to get really, really fast.
Yep.
Our brains don't quite comprehend exponential effects.
I hear you.
You listen to all the folks that are actually in the field, and all of them are pointing to how they're using AI to do AI now. And so once that clicks in, it goes kaboom.
I read a blog post actually after we spoke. I was trying to figure out who's right, or rather what other people think, right? Yeah. And I think they were saying that before the last 5 years of development, most people were saying that it would take another 30 to 60 years or something. Yeah, and now it's like 5 to 20, basically max. Yeah. And it's a huge shift in thinking. And who knows, with more developments, they might shorten the time span.
Yeah, I think simply because we don't compute in exponential, we don't see the world exponentially. And so we try to, when we see something, we sort of roll it out sequentially, and that's why it's going to take 20, 30 years. Right? But we don't see the effects of AI doing AI, which becomes exponential. Right? And that's very short amount of time because AIs they move really, really fast. Right?
Stupid question. Like, why do you think that it's happening now only, right? Like, why couldn't AI do AI before? Like, what is so special about what's happening now that's making that possible?
Doing AI is complex work. It's very hard work intellectually. And the before AI can do AI, humans have to do AI
and that's
to the point where AI can do AI. Right? So that just takes time. We are very slow carbon-based life forms. Right? So very, very slow.
That's a question to be thought through, actually. And let me think about that, and maybe we can come back to it later. So you said that you think that AI doing AI is happening, and it's happening exponentially, and everyone in the field sees that. The AI doing efficiency is happening as we speak, but because humans take time to adapt, that might take time. Is interesting. So help, I guess, other people understand what you're saying, right? So is it correct to say that you think technological singularity might come before economic singularity? Is that what you're saying?
I am not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure because I don't know when the technology will be good enough to take over. So we got to define what technological singularity is. If you look at sort of what some folks like Ray Kurzweil says, it's when technology is so advanced that we cannot understand it.
Right? Just now you said we can't understand some of the stuff being done already.
No, we can't understand what it's reasoning about the world, right? The theories that it comes up with.
Got it. Okay.
Right? How physics work. We might struggle to understand the physics that AIs come up with in 10, 20 years time. Right? So to me, when it's so much more advanced than our brains is when I think folks define
that is
technological singularity. You could relax it a bit and say, look, when AI can do the work of any human being on the planet, that's technological singularity. That's super. What do you call it? Super
AGI
intelligence.
or super intelligence.
Yeah. So you could talk about it in that sense, and I think that would be sooner than the technological singularity that Kurzweil talks about.
Recently, I think Sam Altman defined it even more narrowly. Actually,
AGI.
AGI, yeah. He said it was, and I think it was for the purposes of his company, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he said, AGI is the ability for intelligence to take over the most valuable work, basically.
Yeah.
So valuable could be, however, I think economically valuable is how he defined it.
Economically, not anything else.
Not anything. So he's not saying we can do everything, but it makes sense for him to define it in that way, though, right? Because it makes sense if he could apply his intelligence to anything, it would be on economically valuable things.
Yes,
and secondly, by achieving that goal, which is a narrow goal sooner, his investors will be happy a lot. So it makes sense for him to define it in that way, but I thought it was interesting to hear his definition of it as well.
Well, if you generalize that to refer to anything that humans can do, right?
There's a wide range.
Value is difficult to talk about if you just say economic value, because there's a lot of things that I would not restrict that definition of value to just economic value, because there are a lot of things that are important to us that
may not be
could
economic.
do.
Like love.
We'll
talk about that in a second. No, but we'll talk about that. We talked about this before, actually, briefly. So wait, but let me make sure I understand your view of the world, right? So AI efficiency is already happening, but because humans may take time to, adopt these tools, it may not happen as quickly.
Also, just because you have an AI that can be your assistant doesn't mean the interfaces to all the pieces that it needs to interface to is ready to go or are ready to go. So it might, so the user building that AI might have to integrate to the calendar. It might have to integrate to email and all that stuff. So that takes time to build up. So long as humans are doing AI, right? So at some point it goes bang because the AIs are doing all that integration.
No, it's interesting because I think we spoke about this briefly before, where right now a lot of the very intelligent AI we're interacting with is very much through software still, right? We are talking to ChatGPT on a computer. We're using it for, writing poetry, doing copywriting, but it's not really interfacing with our day-to-day lives, right? So for example, I just had a baby, and, I really think that, we talked about this as well, but caregiving is such a multifaceted job, but at the same time, it's very repetitive. So arguably a robot could be doing it, but we're far from it, right? So, or even something simple like a more enhanced laundry machine. I was thinking about this the other day. A laundry machine is like so basic. Even though these days when you buy laundry machines, it says it's AI powered, but it doesn't even do simple things like, collect your laundry, which I think everybody would be happy if it could do that. It doesn't do things like sort your colors from your whites. It doesn't recommend which dial it should go. You have to use your brain to figure that out.
I think one other singularity you could talk about is the robotic singularity, and you got to think about how to define that properly. But you're going to see what happened to the mobile phone, drones, EVs, and a bunch of other things happen to robots.
Right? I think that would be really interesting. At CES this year, I think they were talking about how robots is really the next frontier. There's a lot of stuff being done, but we still don't see it being extremely widely used.
It's actually just a matter of focus. And focus. Jensen Huang just announced that he's created this physical world to train robots at 10,000 times faster. And so one 5-minute stint in that simulation is like a year of training. So things like that are gonna really accelerate the ability for robots to be used in a very nuanced way. I'm willing to bet you if I were totally paraplegic, and I wanted to live by myself 10 years from now, I could do it with me and my robot.
Oh, that would be amazing.
He'll clean me up, and just take care of me.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It could be a robot trained on, as you said, like a general world first. And then there probably could be tools for you to map your own world, like your room, your house.
There'll be, at that point, the
robot will solve it.
The AIs will have enough understanding of the world to interface to the robots who will have enough physical understanding of the world to do what they need to do. And there'll be nuance, there'll be subtle. They can be very forceful, but they can be very, very nuanced, right? In their physical motion. So I'm not too hung up about how
we get there.
We're gonna get there.
But I think, like the Eric Schmidt video you sent me, I think not everyone really believes that. He was, as in, like, they say he was saying the AI is underhyped, right? And I thought it was very interesting because many people would argue it's overhyped, right? The joke I had was the other day I walked in through Quartz, which is the electronics department store, and literally, like, every machine is like AI powered energy. No, on several fronts, by the way. The energy front is AI, and the functionality is AI, although it's not really. And a lot of people would say, oh, they say all this stuff, but nothing is really happening.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people would argue that it's overhyped, but I think people like us actually think it's like massively underhyped.
We're not going to get into singularities and all that stuff, but that stuff breaks economies. That stuff breaks a lot of what we're used to.
Yeah.
And so we're definitely underhyping, potentially what could happen with this kind of tech.
I think one of the things you sent me recently that was a good example is, Waymo and self-driving cars.
Yep.
I mean, self-driving cars is something we've been talking about for the past 10 years.
Yep.
But, I think for the first time now, it's like, A, both demonstrating better outcomes than human-driven cars, and B, actually gaining market share.
Yes, just for tell the audience what.
Oh, so Waymo is Google's spun out self-driving vehicle entity. And I believe, it's gained market share to become one of the leaders, if not the leader in San Francisco.
It has the same number of rides in San Francisco as Lyft.
Yeah. Something like 22% or something. Yeah. But that's quite amazing, given that, you and I go there a lot. Uber and Lyft were the de facto providers.
No one's driving.
Yeah. But I also thought it was interesting reading the article because it was talking also about the economic angle of it, because it's expensive still at this stage. But because in ride sharing, it's a revenue generating item. And secondly, without a driver, it can do it 24 hours a day. It can then cover the cost of the technology, which for now is still not very economical. Right?
Yes.
But it's already being done. And now the ride sharing companies have no choice but to partner with them or develop equally good technology.
Yeah.
So I think it was saying in like Texas or Austin, they're now partnering with like the local companies because no choice. Right. Yeah. But that's an example of how I think, humans doing AI, have done a good job finally in one area. But as you said, robots, right? This is an example of robots, going back to what you're saying. And I think self-driving cars is where people understand it the most because it's already kind of happening.
Yeah.
But, in so far as it can do even better in the next 10 years, right? You were saying, one is it permeates all aspects of our lives in much more nuanced ways.
Yes.
It can be personalized to our experiences.
There are
it'll be so amazing.
Yeah, there are 2-3 places that robots will accumulate. One would be in industry, which is
already happening. Yeah.
And the other one that start to be visible is robots being visible in business areas where they're delivering things, etc. Right. Security patrols, and so on. And then obviously the last place that there'll be an explosion of robots will be our homes.
In our homes, yeah. That's a nice way to think about it. I guess the first is, as you said, industry, maybe in like, let's say, in large factories, right, doing the manufacturing or helping with the sorting of goods and so forth. The second is like in public spaces, like buses, right? Buses is a very obvious one, I think, of self-driving vehicles being used. Or as you said, they might be doing the food delivery and so forth. Yeah. But the third, which I think people don't think about as much, although it's starting to happen, is in our homes. Yeah. I think people think of it differently today. I think people think of it as like the robot vacuum.
Yes.
I think that's the most common where you see a robot.
Well, it's just like a self-driving car.
It is.
Shrunk down and
And maybe to some extent Alexa, and to some degree Google Home, where they control or Xiaomi Home for that matter, where they control the devices in your home.
Yeah.
But right now it's not a very holistic, intelligent device, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure how at this point you could look at Alexa or Xiaomi Home and say that's an intelligent.
It's not intelligent. I mean, it purports to be. I was telling you the other time that we have Tapo, which is one of the most popular CCTV apps, and it does have a lot of AI smart features. And, one of the examples is crying detection. So, they kind of can tell when my baby is crying and they alert me to it. Although when a Netflix movie, someone yells, they also say it's my baby. So, but it's an example of something that's useful, but it doesn't really do very much beyond sounding an alarm.
And
basically.
It's because there's almost no intelligence attached to these things. It's just detection.
Yeah. So I think it would be really interesting when it starts really affecting our day-to-day lives in that way, because I think people see it as a very abstract thing still that helps big companies, but not us in our daily lives.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, very interesting. So there's almost, I would argue, two thematic themes going on and two verticals that we've talked about, right? The two thematic themes are like AI, being more efficient, making our lives more efficient with time.
Yes.
And the other theme is AI itself, building on AI, which will accelerate the creation of these technologies. And then at the same time, there's both what we talked about, the software world that we interface with, but also the robotics world that might affect our physical day-to-day lives. So, wow. So I guess that leads to the next topic, which is like, how do you feel about all this as a, someone, in the middle of your career, I guess.
It's not how I feel about it. It's what's going to happen.
Yep.
Right. If you just sat down and thought about it, if the value of labor starts to move towards zero and the value of knowledge starts to move towards zero, you get strange things happening. Like at some point, I think governments stop issuing patents.
Yeah.
If you think about what a patent is for a lot of time, energy, and money focused on building a novelty.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you get a monopoly over it for a few years so you can recoup your investments and make money. Well, what if it takes 5 minutes to create novelty?
I remember we discussed this briefly where, when generative AI became more a part of our life like 2 to 3 years ago, one of the things that really struck me was we always thought about AI replacing the most menial tasks, but now it can do things that we associate with geniuses, like write poetry, write amazing songs. Now I can write poetry in any form I want, okay? It could be like a sonnet, it could be a long, it could be in a comical style or funny, or non-funny style, right? So it's like, it's extraordinary that's one thing.
Yeah. I think we have this meme that machines cannot be creative. So all the creative stuff is reserved for humans. And strangely enough, when the AI started doing stuff, is the creatives that get in trouble because they can
it's
do
very interesting
because it doesn't have to be so precise.
No.
So it could be wrong and be wrong in a funny way, and we laugh about it.
And it can adopt the human voices that's on the internet and also replicate that very quickly, right? But I think no one expected it to be original. That's the part, right? But originality, to some degree, one could argue, is like combining things together.
There's no such thing as original.
But I think that was the shocking thing for many people, which is like, the Bard, Shakespeare, we think of as geniuses, but now we do all these things. But I think what you touched on just only was also very interesting, right? Which is, we think about like drug discovery or like the invention of new, like the light bulb or something as very valuable, right? We look at Thomas Edison or Leonardo da Vinci as gods almost, right? But now what you're saying is that inventions, may become, I guess, a 5-minute thing. Yeah. So all
which
the
is
things,
great. Which is great. Abundance,
it is,
right?
But it's very shocking in some ways too, because, things that we have traditionally associated with genius and traditionally associated with value has now completely been commoditized.
Well, that teaches us for not being clear with our definitions.
Right?
We don't know what a genius is, and so now you have to call the AI a genius, right?
Although, that's true. That's true. I wonder if the definition of genius may also have changed over time, actually, right? Probably. So I never really studied this, but I think for now, at the very least, I think we are seeing that many fields that we associate with genius now being made much more, as we keep saying,
pedestrian.
Yeah. Does that again scare you as someone I consider highly intelligent?
No, I mean those are tools. I mean, if you think about what tech people do, they work with other tech people, other intelligences, if you will, right? Yeah. They used to be all humans, but that's just changing, right? So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think there's a lot of podcasts and talks out there about how it's going to help humans, actually, right? Yep. But I think the question is it going to help for, but I think, do you think that it's going to help humans for a while? Or do you think it's going to replace our jobs?
Both.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. I think I alluded to that earlier. I think AI brings abundance to humanity, but it brings abundance in a very unevenly distributed form.
That's one of the first things you said. Yeah.
Yes, and so the problem is, how do you distribute it? Right?
Can you elaborate on that, if you don't mind?
Well, we could go right into singularity.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about how we live, most of us in a capitalist system on top of what looks something like a democracy, right? And what happens? So capitalism basically uses the fact that labor can generate some value to allow the distribution of value across the society, so everyone can have something to eat, food, house, everything, clothes. And the problem is, it makes a critical assumption that gets into trouble because of AI. It assumes that the value of labor is always non-zero, right? And if that is not true anymore, if it just heads towards zero, you get a Gini index like you won't believe in society, because not a lot of people own capital, right? So only capital can produce value now. Labor cannot produce value, or not enough. So what happens? Right? And fundamentally, there's two ways to fix this, right? One is you end up as a socialist state, right? You get rid of capital. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Capital doesn't mean anything. Everything's owned by the state, right? So that's one way. The other way is you make everyone a capitalist, right? Give them some equity, and you need to give them an AI to manage that equity too.
If you don't mind me double clicking on these two things. So the first one, you said we become socialist, where everyone is equal except the state. Is it the state that will be dominant at the stage, or will it be the ones who own the machines?
So that's one. Yeah, that'll be the state.
That'll be the state. Oh, the state. But the state may not be the same shape and form as it is today.
Oh, so
when you say the state, do you mean
no? So
governments?
The people in power.
The people in power.
So it could be a corporation that takes over.
That's right. Absolutely.
But I don't think that the problem for the corporations is they don't have physical might, right? They don't have armies.
Ooh, right? That might change.
I don't know, but not anytime soon, I think. And so they could buy out the government. They could potentially buy out the government.
They're already generating self-driving cars. They could have self-driving artillery. They could have drones. They could attack you through cyber.
No, they have to attack the government.
They have to attack the government, exactly.
Yeah, but
take over. Government
think through that. think through that, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be so easy. And anyway, we're very quickly drifting to sci-fi right now. But so I was talking more first principles wise, right? If you have capitalism breaking because there's no more value from labor, then large swaths of population unable to generate value. Two ways to fix it, right? Get rid of the meaning of capital, or the value aspects of capital, and use the capital at the state level to provide everyone with what they need. Right?
Yep.
So that's one way. The other way is
everyone has
some
some
capital.
distribution.
Yeah.
So in the first instance, what would someone, let's say I'm not in the state, what would I be doing on a day-to-day basis? Would I actually be working, or?
That's a good question. I think in both cases, whether you solve it with capitalism, pure capitalism, where everything is just capital, ownership, or you solve it with socialism, you still have that to ask the question, what's the meaning of life? And I think society needs to start reflecting on it, because that's the thing that keeps it going, right? So there'll be groups that worship God all day long. There'll be groups that decide to go to Mars, the Star Trek world. There'll be good groups that want to compete with each other all the time, what I call the Olympics world. There'll be groups that want to do art and dance all day long. And then there'll be cross products of all these things, right? People
That's
to
really
go to Mars to pray to God.
That could be the seed. Back to the book that you're talking about in the beginning.
Yeah. So I think we do not get away from addressing that question, that until now only a few of us have the luxury of asking ourselves, right? The vast swath of humanity is just too busy making a living to ask those questions. Now everyone has to ask that question. Or I guess they could just live in Wally World and just get fat and enjoy video games.
To some degree, we're
doing that.
Doing that, exactly. Except that, as you said, right, today the value of labor is not zero.
Yeah.
So you still have to work to, make ends meet, right? And there's still work for you to do because the machines are not quite there yet.
Yes.
Right. So, but once that happens, I do think it's a bigger question of what we do there.
Yes.
But some people might say, "Oh, that's great. Why don't I have to work? Maybe I will just enjoy life, right?"
Yes.
So
and
not
die young.
They'll die young. Maybe that's not so bad. Or maybe there will be new frontiers in longevity medicine that allow me to live long without having to work.
Meaning? You live long without meaning?
So I think meaning is, this is almost an entire episode in itself, actually. Yeah. Right? I don't even recall I spoke to you about my own views on meaning of life maybe a few years ago when I saw you. Well, anyway, that's almost an episode in itself. So so I guess the question is, what is the everyday person going to be doing, number one, and number two, what is the meaning of that existence, I guess, and that's topic for another time. Yes. But I guess for in the meantime, for people perhaps like us who have the luxury but also maybe the interest in this topic, how do you see yourself tackling this, and do you have any thoughts on how others like you may want to think about this?
I'm an engineer, so my purpose is to make a difference with the stuff I build. Right, that's the engineering ethos, and so it gets interesting when you start to think about what the phase 1 and phase 2 of AIs will start doing. Right, if you think about it, the $600 billion being invested in the last few years into AI is going to end up creating commoditized products and services, because nothing is differentiated, right? Intelligence is basically compute and storage. Compute and storage are utilities, so intelligence at some point is going to be a utility. There's so many AIs being built around the world that I don't see one becoming vastly superior to another one. So and for what we need them for, it's not a high bar, right? So most of them to us will be the same, right? There might be some super use of an AI that only Google can do, but I don't see that affecting us or any business at all. Right? There might be some scientists, etc. So I think we're going to get commoditized intelligence from this process, which is great because commoditized means cheap, right? Cheap means we can do a lot of stuff with the intelligence to benefit people, right? You're going to get a lot more, I think, benefits from companies helping you stuff. Maybe your assistant might be free. Maybe your researcher or chief of staff might be free. Right.
I was telling you, I was looking for a therapist, and therapy is very expensive. It's $300 an hour for 50 minutes, not even an hour. Yeah. It's expensive and usually you want it more rather than less.
Yes.
But I find myself kind of thinking, oh, how many sessions do I really want? Because it's both a constraint on my time, but also a constraint on budget, right? Yeah. So you're absolutely right. All these things can be free. I increasingly am. So, but yeah, a lot of things can become easier. Yeah. But I think the challenge, and I don't know if you want to segue into this topic, is what do we do as founders and investors, right? Because if everything is commoditized, so let's say I want to build, back in the day, if I wanted to build an app to do XYZ, I would come to you.
Yes.
You'd be like, oh my God, it's awesome, but let's look at the competitors. And usually there might be 10, 20, depending on what it is in that field. You might ask me questions like, how does your technology beat someone else's technology? How is your team better, right? Do you have XYZ on your team? I remember you used to ask me these questions. But it was really a matter of, in some ways, a fixed set of problems. Yes. Now it's like anybody possibly could build this. How do we build businesses?
Imagine a world where AI does AI is commonplace, right? And you want to start a business and you go, here's $50,000. I want to launch a business like that one over there, which helps people register companies, whatever, some random business. And the AI will go build a marketing plan, will go acquire users, will build a platform to provide that service, and start collecting money. The only problem is somebody else has probably done that too. So the competition is going to the bottom, right? Yep. So the question before you jump in and try to start a company, you got to ask yourself, what is potentially defensible in what I'm doing, right? Otherwise, if it's not defensible, you end up building a cost-plus business, a commoditized business, which at scale, it could be still interesting. But if you look at what the investors are doing now, they're investing in data centers, right? Because the margins of data centers is not that high, but it's high enough to return some high level of yields than most other forms of investing. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's relatively lower risk. Except the chips are going to get obsoleted very quickly. So that is a domain that you need to spend time thinking about. I think we were talking about reserving that last piece
for another podcast. Okay.
So this might be a good time to end.
Sounds good. So it sounds like there's many topics actually that could be future podcasts.
Yeah.
One of them is, what would this future look like actually, right?
Yes.
And how might it impact specific industries? Right, I think it might impact various industries similarly, given these are broad themes, but also maybe differently because some may have more regulation, some may have different challenges, etc., etc. A second piece is the philosophical piece. I would really like to deep dive actually into that existential, philosophical black hole that we started touching on. And I think the third one is really, as investors and founders, if you really believe intelligence is getting commoditized and that technology can start actually solving some of the problems on its own, then what do we as, former or current technology founders and investors do? Yeah. So I think all these are potential future topics. And I think that we can have many more episodes on this, and I look forward to that.
And I'll end with a very positive note. I'm actually very excited about what the world is going to become.
Yep.
There's some challenges we have to face, but I think we will get around those and we'll build worlds that start to look like these books around here.
Yeah. What's funny?
The good ones.
No, I totally hear you. Yeah. I actually think, for the longest time, I was really, so for me, I don't think I shared my personal reasons for being so interested in this stuff. I think I've always been curious about why are we here and, what brought us here, right? And I think that's why I, from a young age, try to explore all kinds of religions.
Yeah.
Often with a very skeptical view because I am a questioning person, but I always wanted to understand what are the possible explanations that we're here. I remember in high school, I studied postmodern literature, which basically not just questions the book, but questions what reality is. And then as I got older, I, really got into simulation theory and thinking that, we must be a simulation. And yet feeling a little odd about thinking that, because while it was a very popular theory amongst niche circles. It's not something you go around saying. And I think for a long time, I struggled with knowing what to make of that view. And I think when I approached you several years ago to say, I feel a little nihilist at times because I'm like, didn't know what to do with that view. It was a very lonely endeavor. And so actually, when I saw some of these things happening in the past few years, I actually got really excited because it was like, I told you so, kind of to myself, really. And I think it's really exciting meeting other people who are actually working on these problems. And I think for the first time, we have lots of people working on this problem. And, I think that people do get afraid of this because of all the questions that we've talked about. But at the same time, it really, I think, allows us to probe the questions of existence, meaning, and our, question about what is intelligence that we've never really questioned before in a very interesting way, actually. Yeah.
This probably is another podcast, but I'll say this. My view is that purpose requires faith. And it requires faith because we're epistemologically unable to dig into the questions of what's purpose. So you have to make a decision and have faith is the right decision. As opposed to
say that again, sorry?
You have to make a decision on what your purpose is and have faith that it's the right one. Because you're never ever going to be able to find from a epistemological perspective, figure out what it is. Right.
Okay, but why do you have to make a decision on what real purpose is?
Otherwise, you don't have a purpose.
Right. Okay.
So yes, you can choose not to have a purpose, but that's a choice.
That's a
also.
choice, yeah.
That's a conscious
and then
choice.
if you do choose to make one, then you're saying that
then
you have
need
to have
faith. Because
that
there's
is
no
the right one.
data that tells you. Right. So like I said, this is a whole
this is an entire discussion in itself. I actually think it would be interesting to see how AI can actually help us answer some of these questions, or not actually.
It'll tell you we can't.
Maybe
we
it
don't
can
know.
simulate your life going forward. Who knows?
Yeah, but that doesn't tell you why.
Anything? That's true. And that's up to you to figure out yourself. Yeah, all right.
To not just figure out, but decide.
Ooh, this is definitely another podcast. I will definitely simmer on that.
Let's do
all right, on that note, I guess thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We don't have an audience yet, but we hope to have one soon. Thank you so much.
Ring around the Milky Way. What will happen? Who can say? Robots helping day by day, making life a cheerful play. Twinkle, twinkle, robot friend. What new things are around the bend? Questions, answers, big and small. AI helping through it all. Clap your hands and spin around. See what wonders can be found. In the future we will see all the things that